Welcome to Golf Smarter Mulligans, your second chance to gain insight and advice from the best instructors featured on the Golf Smarter podcast. Great golf instruction never gets old. Our interview library features hundreds of hours of game improvement conversations like this that are no longer available in any podcast app.
Confidence is everything. I think you've seen, in the last several years, more people going to hybrids rather than using a 3-iron or a 4-iron. And it's because they have more confidence in a higher lofted club that has a longer shaft and gives them the same distance as the shorter iron that had the little blade, and you're looking down on that 3 or 4 iron. It looks like you're standing on the edge of Half Dome there looking straight down, and you have a little bit more confidence seeing a wider bodied club with a lot more face angle. So it's all about confidence, and you get the confidence partly from practice and also partly from the innovations that as club makers we've come up with in the last decade or so. It's really been a great decade of innovation, but there's only so much that we can do now under the USGA restrictions.
With another interview from the archives of Golf Smarter, here's your host, Fred Green.
Welcome back to the Golf Smarter podcast, Jesse.
Hey, how you doing, Fred?
I'm doing so well. Thank you for coming on, being part of our celebration of the first 300 episodes. You have definitely been not only one of my favorite people to speak with, but you were also incredibly gracious and helpful when we did an event with our listeners by coming out and playing golf with us and answering their questions and demoing what was going on at Bobby Jones Golf at the time. So thank you.
No, that was a great time, Fred. In fact, I remember it kind of drizzled that day, didn't it? Or did it actually rain hard? I know that
we had a little drizzle.
We got the round in, but it was we got the round in, but barely, I think.
Yeah. No, we got it in, had some hot dogs afterwards, and then did our recording.
Yeah.
And still, actually, one of the my friend came and took photographs of us, and one of the best photographs I've ever taken in my life was the one I have of you and I together. So. So
you look fabulous because you're standing next to me. That's why I'm making you look good.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yeah, it has to be.
So how things going at Bobby Jones Golf?
Well, it's kind of this time of year things slow down in the industry. It's September, October are really the slowest months of the year for play, and that's because the East Coast, the Midwest. It's slowing down. It's the end of the season. For a lot of people, it's the weather has changed. It's gotten a lot colder. Also, football season, college football season, and hunting become very prominent in the mid to late fall. And so a lot of the country kind of hibernates on golf. Out here on the West Coast, we still can play, but what's happening is Arizona and Palm Springs, they haven't started up yet because they go into overseeding in October. So really mid-September through October is the slowest time of year for play. In November, that's when the grass comes back up in Palm Springs, Arizona, also in Florida. So golf starts picking up a bit in the south, in the southern climates that time of year, November into December. So right now it's slow, but I'm busy because this is the time of year where you're rushing to get all the new product lines set up for introduction, by around Christmas or January.
Yeah. Well, and also, luckily, we have a global audience, so I know that my email increases from Australia when we go into our winter because they're going into their summer. And I get a lot of email from Australia from people saying, yeah, my season's getting started, so I want to know. And like, whoa, wait a minute. You've got me all upside down here, literally.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. You talk about getting the new product line ready for launching at the PGA show, which is in end of January, beginning of February. I had a conversation with Tom Wishon a few episodes back. You're familiar with Tom, aren't you?
Absolutely. Tom and I are longtime friends, probably 30 years.
Oh, wow.
He was in Marin. That's where Tom was from. I think originally he was from Colorado, but He spent, I believe, his teenage years and in his 20s here in Marin, and he's one heck of a drummer too. You know, he played drums for Steve Miller. I don't know if he ever told you.
Come
that.
on.
Probably a hidden. No, it's a hidden secret from Tom. It's a little gem. Yeah, he would play session and practice sessions with Steve Miller.
Wow. Oh, I'm going to nail him on that one. Yeah, he's told me his mom lives up in Novato, which is the next town up from me here in San Rafael. And so, you know, we've threatened one another to get together, but he's here coming to see his mom. He doesn't need to see me. It's, you know, but yeah. So yeah, he's in Colorado now. But Tom is probably, I would think, the leading spokesperson for the custom club making. And we talked about, you know, all the restrictions that are put on the major manufacturers, club manufacturers, and that actually most of the money seems to go into advertising. Far more money goes into advertising than goes into R&D, because you really can't come up with new products every 6 months or every year.
Well, that's absolutely true. It's you know, I'm a perfect example of that, where the line that I've had, Fred, has, you know, we've had it for 3 years now. That's virtually unheard of. You know, in our industry, people are changing every 6 months, sometimes 3 times in a year, but certainly very, very few companies have a model line that doesn't change every year. You know, I'm kind of unusual because I try to stay ahead of the curve so that our equipment has a shelf life of at least 2, if not 3 years. And really, in the last several years, more than anything, the changes in models have been cosmetic. I mean, the restrictions for ball velocity off the face of a driver have not changed in the last 5 or 6 years, yet everyone's got different models. Well, why? Well, it's just another angle to a planned obsolescence and get people to believe that their current clubs are not as good as the ones that were made or the ones that they have in their bag in the last 3 years. So Tom is right. There are a lot of restrictions, and most of the changes are really cosmetic in the industry.
How do you, as if I'm not mistaken, you're still the COO of Bobby Jones Golf? Is that
my actual title now is Vice President of the Bobby Jones division of HMX. Back in January, we merged with the apparel company. The Jones family in Atlanta wanted one master licensee to handle or oversee all the licensees with Bobby Jones. So there was a fragrance company, there was a leather goods company, there was us, the equipment company. There's a company that puts out videos and tapes. They wanted it all under one umbrella. So we merged in January with the HMX Corporation, which handles, it's a huge apparel company that owns Bobby Jones. It owns Hickey Freeman, Hart Schaffner Marks, does tailored, I think it's Austin Reed, does tailored Pierre Cardin. There's a lot of brands that they have, so I'm under that umbrella now.
All right. So as a vice president of a company, especially that's owned by a larger company, I would suspect that they want to get reports from you on an annual basis on your projections for growth and how you're going to infiltrate the market in a larger scale. They have to answer, I would suspect they have to answer to shareholders, I'm guessing. Or is it a private company?
It's a private company.
Okay, so they don't have to worry about shareholders, but they still have to worry about the bottom line, and they still want to grow their product line. And when you have restrictions like that, and you have a product that's on the market that is relatively unchanged for as long as it is, how can you, as a businessman, not as a club maker, how do you justify that to them? How do we deal with that?
It's difficult. I mean, you're always trying to think of coming up with something that's fresh, something that still remains true to the name or the brand Bobby Jones. What I do, Fred, is I try to make clubs that still have a classic elegance about them, but you've got to have all the high-tech components in there. You got to stay on top of what are the metals that are out there that we can use that might be able to not so much enhance performance, but I'd say enhance the experience or the enjoyment of the game. I try to make clubs that are a little easier to hit, but still look good to good players. And it's difficult. This past year, TaylorMade had a real big hit with the R11, but really it got a lot more buzz because it was a white club than really for what it was technologically, speaking. So
how do you react to that when somebody comes out with the exact same club, but they spray paint it white and bring it out as if they've found the new secret? How do you react to something like? Do you roll your eyes? Do you start throwing things across the room? It's like, come on, people, really?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because I know what's going on, and we're all trying to make our clubs better looking, more attractive. We're trying to make them, a little bit more forgiving within the restrictions that are laid upon us by the USGA. But on the other hand, I'm excited because anything that brings attention or pizzazz, or as I would say, adds spice to the gumbo in the equipment arena is very welcome, because with the economy the way it is and golf, play is down, sales across the board are down, the resorts are struggling. Anytime you can get buzz in the golf industry, it's good for the industry as a whole. Losing Tiger for the last year and a half hasn't helped ratings, and it's so. Yes, I roll my eyes. I know what's under the kimono, as they say, technologically speaking. But I also welcome that there is some buzz around the industry.
It's interesting because you talk about how it's supposed to enhance performance, which is not necessarily the case, but so you want to enhance the experience or enhance enjoyment. And the thing that came to my mind, especially after talking to all the instructors that I've spoken with, is that I guess the one thing you really want to enhance is confidence in a golfer.
That's right. Well, that's right. I mean, there's probably a lot more. To paraphrase Woody Hayes when they used to ask him, the great Ohio State coach, Woody, why don't you throw the ball more? Well, gee, when you throw the ball, 3 things can happen and 2 of them are bad. It's kind of the same thing with golf. There's just so much more bad that can happen from striking a golf ball than good. You can top the ball, slice it, hook it, chunk it. I mean, hitting the perfect shot is extremely rare. And even when you hit a good shot, you could always say, well, gee, it could have been better. I didn't quite catch it. I just missed it. So, it's what we're trying to do is, or what I try to do, I do these little videos every month or so. I try to tell people to get out and play and just enjoy being out and having fun. You can't get upset at bad shots because we're not doing this for a living. We're out there to have fun, get out in the outdoors, challenge ourselves, and bad shots are part of the game. I mean, that's that's kind of a reminder that you should be practicing a little bit more, although few of us practice enough to really improve our games. We keep going out there and playing, and like Dave Pelz would say, Jesse, I think a lot of guys should go to the driving range and leave, of the 14 clubs they got in their bag, they probably should leave, at least 10 of them in the trunk of the car. Just go out there with your pitching wedge and your sand iron and, maybe a 9-iron or a 7, and just hit those, practice with those clubs, because most of the shots that you are going to lose are going to be within 100 yards and in, from the greens. So just go out and practice the short game, but very few of us do. We're all out there at the driving range hitting the big dog and, trying to see how far we can hit it. And in the end, it's all about getting the ball in the hole. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, and for some, you're right. They grab the big dog and getting the ball in the air. And I guess my marketing thoughts would be that you want to, when I talk about instilling confidence, it's the front end of the club. It's like, what club am I going to reach for that I have total confidence in every time I grab that club, every time I swing that club, not what happens after I swing the club, it's what I do before I swing the club. And that's the kind of thing that you want a consumer to take with them.
Absolutely. I mean, confidence is everything. I think you've seen, in the last several years, more people go into hybrids rather than using a 3-iron or a 4-iron. Even 5-irons are starting to get pretty rare when you go out there and see the average golfer, play, and it's because they've lost. They have more confidence in a higher lofted club that has a longer shaft and gives them the same distance as the shorter iron that had the little blade, and you're looking down on that 3 or 4 iron. It looks like you're standing on the edge of Half Dome there, looking straight down, and it's you have a little bit more confidence seeing a wider bodied club with a lot more face angles. So, it's all about confidence, and you get the confidence partly from practice and also partly from the innovations that as club makers we've come up with in the last decade or so. It's really been a great decade of innovation, but you were right. As you said, as we were talking about earlier in the podcast, there's only so much that we can do now under the USGA restrictions.
Yeah. Tom was on, again, we're going to go back to Tom for a second because he is, the club maker, the individual club maker, not the big manufacturer. Now, your history, you pretty much came from a smaller environment. Your dad, you were an apprentice to your dad, correct?
That's right. Yeah, my dad was a tool and die maker from the old country, which specifically the Basque region, northern part of Spain, and came here in about 1950, 51, and then started Orlamar in 1960. He was a tool and die maker, and he had a friend of his who was working at a company called Fernquist and Johnson that used to make the Ken Venturi and Tony Lima clubs, and he got my dad interested in the clubs, and through that association, that's how I ended up. My dad made clubs for Tony and Ken, and then that was how my relationship started with Ken Venturi many, many years ago when I was a kid at the shop.
Right. So it wasn't like a Ping or a Callaway. It wasn't one of the big manufacturers. You were doing clubs for individuals, right? You were a small little shop doing one-ups at a time?
Well, it was a different industry in those days.
Yeah.
Fred, it was completely different. Everything was made by hand. I mean, there were no cast clubs. You didn't have castings that came out of molds that could be mass produced. You didn't have, woods were made out of wood. Well, I mean, what a concept, right? Woods were made out of wood.
Is that where that word came from?
That's where that word came from. So you had to, lathe turn all the heads individually from a block of wood. Forgings came in just rough blanks, and then you would have to grind every one by hand. You'd then have to hand stamp the score lines and the graphics on it. That's just the way it was. Every club was unique. Every club was handmade, and that's where all your efforts were placed, was in actually manufacturing the product. Today, it's just a giant marketing game. That's what it is. All the product comes from foundries, pretty much from the Far East. Everyone uses China now, unfortunately, to make all the club heads, and all the money is really put into marketing, promotion, paying huge endorsement contracts, and it's just a whole different game now than the industry that I grew up in.
And is it better for the golfer now? Or
I think the quality of golf equipment today is far superior to what it was 30, 40, 50 years ago. What has deteriorated is, I think, the real craftsmanship, the real the customization. I would agree with Tom that a lot of that has been lost in the industry. Now companies are coming out with adjustable clubs where you can make it hook face or open face or upright or flat or whatever. There are a lot more options today, but I think we've lost the real connection to the craftsman and the craftsman and the artist. Really, it's completely different today. I think we've lost that, and I think people would love, really, golfers. The game is just so steeped in tradition. I think by losing that connection to the craftsman or the artist who handmade the clubs, it's diminished. It's diminished the how can I say it, the aura or the mystique of the game. It's just a different story. I still think people believe, would love to have a relationship with an actual craftsman or artist, but now that's a lot more difficult.
Yeah. And from what I understand, you kind of, I don't want to blame you for this, Jesse, but you kind of contributed to all of that growth by creating a club that changed the face of golf.
Well, yes.
Am I putting you on the spot by having you tell the story of the tri-metal fairway wood? Please.
It's an ironic story. I mean, you're right. I mean, I did change the face of the industry a decade ago, and some of it was for the better. I mean, I clearly was fortunate to stumble on an idea to make clubs a little easier to hit, and it changed the game for millions of golfers worldwide. But then I also ushered in an industry from Asia, because before tri-metal, very few of the clubs were made overseas. A lot of the foundries were in Southern California, and the finishing and grinding and painting was done across the border in Mexico. There were clubs coming from Taiwan and Asia, but not really real high quality clubs. That changed with tri-metal because I could not afford the tooling from the foundries in Southern California. I mean, in those days, back in the mid-'90s, late '90s, Fred, it would cost about $20,000, $25,000 for a mold, to create a master and a mold for a single loft club. So, if you've got, 5 or 6, 2 or 3 drivers and 5 or 6 different lofts for fairway woods, you were spending almost $200,000 just for tooling, where in Asia it was a fraction of that. And so I went there with the idea of mixing and matching up metals, and tri-metal was born. And it really was a forerunner to today's hybrids. We were the first company that really went all the way up to about 35 degrees in a wood. Up until then, you would have a wood that would be maybe, a 6 wood, a 7 wood, maybe a 9 wood. But when we went to tri-metal and just put lofts on the clubs instead of calling them a number, that also changed the way people thought of their high lofted woods. So, yeah, ironic that I've become somewhat of a victim of my success. But that's the way the ball bounces,
Or it slices.
Or slices. Yeah. Or hooks. Yeah, right.
And how did you stumble across something like that?
Well, it's just sometimes desperation's the mother of invention, I guess you could say. Our business was tough because we were always known as a wonderful wood company, and the world had gone to metal. And my father and I realized that, metal had its limitations. in the mid-'90s, everyone was talking about perimeter weighting, and my father and I knew that sole weighting on a club, lowering the center of gravity, was much more important than perimeter weighting. And you could get sole weighting with the wood, because the wood was very light, but then you put a heavy brass plate, and you could really get the CG way down, which gets the ball airborne, which gives you confidence, like we talked about before. And since I understood that a wood was made out of several different materials, whether it was brass, steel, plastic, fiber in the face, different types of woods that we would use, either laminated maple or persimmon, a wood head was not made out of one material. So why would a metal wood, why should that be made out of all titanium or all steel? I felt that if I could mix the properties of the metals, having a certain piece on the head being much thicker than another, having different types of metals, I could move the weight around in the club head and make a club that would be easier to hit and give people more confidence. And that's how I stumbled across it. I knew that the more weight you have on the face of the club or the front wall, the harder it is to get the ball airborne. So make the face super thin was not a long leap of genius. It was just obvious to me. But if you make the face very thin, it collapses. But there are a lot of metals that are a lot stronger than titanium that I knew. And so we started experimenting, and we stumbled on the idea of a club made out of 3 different metals and decided to call it tri-metal. And that's what happened.
An amazing story. That really is a truly amazing story. Now, Jesse, before we go, please tell us how to get to Bobby Jones Golf, the website, and what is going on in your products these days that we should know about and be purchasing.
Well, to get a hold of us, the best way is to go just on the web and go BobbyJones.com. It used to be BobbyJonesGolf.com, but it's BobbyJones.com, and it'll show you the apparel company, our division, and the equipment. You click on there, and you see our latest offerings. And I guess one of the exciting things we didn't talk about, Fred, is that for the first time in a decade, come end of November, I will be introducing a line of irons. That's the first time that I've made irons since Olimar almost 9 years ago. So that's kind of exciting. So it's BobbyJones.com, or you can call the shop. The direct line at the shop is 510-266-0721, and that puts you in touch with the shop right here in Hayward, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area.
Fabulous. And by the way, you can, if you do type in BobbyJonesGolf.com, it'll still go to BobbyJones.com. So either way, you're going to be fine. And
okay.
You're going to be coming up with some irons, huh?
Right. It's a set of irons, very high tech, as you would expect, Fred, made out of 3 or 4 different types of metals that have a very low CG, a very thin face. In fact, the face of the irons is the same material that's in the hybrids and in the fairway woods. It's that mar-aging steel. And so the ball is going to go a bit higher and go a little further. And they're designed really for the average golfer, probably the golfer who's about a 9 handicap and higher. Clean look, very classic look, not a lot of distractions on it, very little offset, but a very low CG with a very thin face to kind of, sling the ball out there. So you can look for those. They should be on the website in about 4 to 6 weeks for a little sneak preview.
Okay, and because it's a podcast, some people may listen to this 4 to 6 weeks after we recorded it. So about what month are we talking about? I
would say that if they get on the website in mid-November, they'll see the irons on there, and we should be delivering early December.
Okay, and that's of 2011, and there's you. Before I was going to say your holiday gift to yourself was going to be these super light shafts that we talk about later, but I think this is your holiday gift right here.
This is going to be it, Fred. This is going to be it. Over the years, I've probably had over 1,000 golfers say they love all the clubs. Hey, Jesse, when are you going to make irons? And I always tell them, well, I don't know when I'm ready. When I'm ready, and in December we're going to have a limited launch of them, and then really full production will start happening in January. But we'll have about 400 or 500 sets available before the end of the year.
All right. Well, when we set up this recording, you said, you want to come down here to Hayward, or do you want to just do it on the phone? And I said, for this time, let's just go ahead and do it on the phone. But you know what? When those irons come out, I'm coming to make a visit.
That's great. I look forward to seeing you, Fred.
Well, look, Jesse, we've hit our 30-minute mark, and I have so many more questions. Would you mind if we said goodbye on this episode, but if you stuck around a little more and we can continue recording and make this an episode for our members-only program for next week?
Absolutely. No problem.
You got time for that?
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate it very much. All right, so we're going to do part 2. Plus, Jesse, I want to talk to you about these adjustable clubs and about shafts and about hybrids and the impact and the importance for every golfer's bag on these elements.
Yeah, congratulations on 300 episodes, Fred.